These films depict real issues faced by women and children and raise awareness on their rights. These films also reflect on the dynamic forces that shape childhood and its socio-economic context. We all remember the iconic roles and storylines of movies like Masoom, Tare Zameen Par, Dhanak, and most recently, Gandhi and Company. This year, strengthening its partnership with UNICEF, NFDC has specially curated a segment on movies depicting the issues of women and children. This session will help us reflect how the depiction of violence against women and children in cinema has a lasting impact on the society. We should also discuss what steps can be taken by the industry to present the view of a safe and secure society for all. Violence can always be prevented, and it's up to each one of us to do so. The film industry is a very important stakeholder with the power to influence positive behaviors. Today we have with us Srimati Neerja Shekhar, Additional Secretary, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, Ms. Vani Tripathi Tikku, who is an actor, producer, author, and member of the CBFC, the wonderful Ms. Shweta Brasu Prasad, who has charmed audiences from a very young age on the big screen, Mr. Pan Nalin, the creative genius behind the India's official entry to the Oscars and the National Film Award winning film Chhelo Show. We also have Ms. Zafreen Chaudhary, Chief of Communication, Advocacy and Partnerships at UNICEF India, who has been working diligently towards the protection of child rights through policy and advocacy. Moderating the discussion, we have Ms. Puja Talwar, Entertainment and Lifestyle Editor and journalist, who will help us weave this conversation on this very important subject. I welcome all the members to come on the stage and share their thoughts on this very important subject. Let's welcome them with a round of applause.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're waiting for Mr. Pan Nalin, but as you've already been introduced to our esteemed panel here today, so I'll waste no time in starting the session. And I think, yeah, Mr. Nalin is, yeah. No worries. Well, it's an important subject, and what we are looking for is an insightful discussion, and since we have our esteemed panel here. So, as you know, it's depiction of violence against children and women in popular cinema. And India being the largest film-producing country in the world, entertainment has always been the key word, and despite the fact that we, world over, are gaining recognition for our content, but I think a concern has been the violence that is shown in our narratives against children and women. And how do we deal with this? What is the way ahead? Can we depict this in a more sensitized manner? So I'll waste no time in first throwing open the question, what is violence? How do we define violence? Because violence is just not physical. It's emotional, it's systematic, it's psychological, a lot of things. So, I mean, all of you here, how would you define violence? Yes, please.
Good morning, everyone. Puja, you are absolutely correct. The physical violence is an extreme form of violence, but it's also a limited concept of violence. Violence can be physical and sexual. It can be emotional, psychological. Neglect is also violence. Hate speech, discrimination, these are also violence according to WHO and UNICEF definitions. And these are extremely detrimental and can leave a lifelong scar on children. And just one more point I would like to say in the opening, violence in real life situations, as well as when they are depicted as a created reality on the tinsel screen, they are equally unacceptable and should be denounced. Because, there are at least more choices in the films not to show what is shown. In real life, also there are choices, but in films, because it's a created reality, it has, more kind of options and choices not to show it in its worst.
But they say films do reflect, art reflects life and life reflects art. But since we have three voices from the world of cinema, I would say, and Shweta, you've been a child artist who has made this journey into an, leading star now. And Vaniji, you work for children, and Mr. Nalin, you have done a film which actually had the child artist as a protagonist. But what I'm trying to ask here is, how is it depicted, in terms of, can we have scripts and narratives without showcasing this violence? Because we have narratives like, I'm just giving an example, back in the 80s, you had movies that were on bride burning. It left such an impact on me, the terrible mother-in-law, brides being burnt, rape, that it impacted a 10-year-old. Like today, 40 years later, it somewhere has conditioned me. Now, I think with social media and so much available, it's, I think, become this, it's like a fire, raging fire, you have just been consumed by it. So now I want to ask you, we've had movies like, Raj Kapoor Saab, Shyam Benegal, who made aesthetic movies. They also address socio-cultural issues. But here we also have movies that are commercial, mainstream films that are so popular, but somewhere they legitimize cheating, mocking women, stalking. It's in our songs. So now I'm just asking the three of you, is it important? Can we have films without this?
I'll first address the word violence. I think it's important to define it in real terms. Violence is a thought. You think violence before you perpetrate it. And when it comes to children and women, the manifestation is not always physical. It's more than psychological. It's almost like crushing the existence of that being, whether it's a child or a woman. And that's why, since I sit on the CBFC board, one of the things that really bothers me, and I hope that the content creators in this room, which also includes me and Nalin, and Shweta, of course, will be very aware of the fact that the more we will legitimize violence around children and around women, the more difficult it will become to counter it. Coming to the depiction part, I think the most important thing today is that we start recognizing the manifestation of this violence. You only think when you actually observe it. There have been eras and eras of cinema and filmmaking where we have not observed the garbage we have created around us. I always say it's also equivocal responsibility of people who are consuming that content. You will watch garbage, I will produce garbage. Stop watching garbage, everything will come to an end. At CBFC a couple of years ago, we took a very conscious decision of not certifying films which objectify women. So change also starts in terms of governance, and Neerja ji is here, and I'm sure she's going to speak about it. But the important part is that the word intent is very important. If you're shooting a crime against women subject, where is your camera angle? It's a top angle shot of a rape, or is, and pardon me, I'm not trying to judge anything here, is a camera in between the legs of a woman. Which means that gaze, that intention is what will define how you portray it. And that's why a Chudel number 1 will be different from NH10. And these are the portrayals, and I'm taking these names, which I do publicly. I've already openly always spoken about it. The intention of the person creating the content is the most important factor. Whether the film is being produced anywhere in the world, you go on saying, we talk about women emancipation, we talk about child rights. but do we even observe which goes into these portrayals? So I think the most important part is observation. If we will observe it, we will explore it, then we will be faced with the reality of how you counter it.
Very well said. Shweta, what about you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I think to address your first question, what is violence? I think violence for me is being robbed of one's identity, and that can be across genders. Um, for giving an example, if I may say, Raj Kapoor Saab's film Mera Naam Joker, there's a track with Vaijanti Malaji where she was a man for a very long time in a world to adjust to a man's world. And she used to wear clothes like men till one day Rajji's character discovered that she was a woman and got her in touch with her identity of a woman. And she lived to become an actor and got married in the film. Films like Sujata, films like Bandini, we are a country where we celebrated actor producer like Devika Rani, who made films like Achut Kanya back in 1935. What happened to us is what I really want to know. What really happened to us after that? After films like Abhiman and films like Ketan Mehta's Mirch Masala and Shyam Benekal's Bhumika, and these are men who have made these stories about women, narratives about women, characters about women, bringing about social topics, depicting them well on cinema. What really happened to us, I don't know. I truly believe, and I talk about it a lot, that I think we as a society, as an industry, cater films for teenagers and not adults in this country. We make movies for teenagers, we make songs for teenagers. We don't make movies for adults because when you're an adult, you'll treat people as an adult. So I think, as you said, ma'am, I think it comes from the intention of a filmmaker, it comes from the intention of an audience, but I think mainly it comes from the intention of a filmmaker. You have to take a choice, you have to make a choice, you have to have that intent of showing something. It's such a responsible job. The dialogues you're writing, the narrative you're setting, the structure you're setting, the characters you're writing. I think you have no idea how it can impact someone sitting in the audience. I was talking to Nawazuddin Siddiqui, and he said that he was watching all these films in his growing up years till he watched Ek Doctor Ki Maut. And he's like, I was sitting in my little town or village in Uttar Pradesh and I'm watching Ek Doctor Ki Maut, and it inspired me to become an actor. It inspired me to do something about movies, to contribute to art and cinema, because Pankaj Kapoorji's character speaks about his work and how it affects universe and space, and how we can make a little dent with, or we can heal with in the entire space with what we do, an extension of who we are. So you have no idea how your words can impact somebody. I think it's a very responsible job, and it definitely makes an impact on the viewers, and one should be careful of what is being catered and to who.
Mr. Nalan.
Good morning, everyone. I'm happy to be with such gorgeous panel. Wow. um, I had kind of a chance in last two movies to work with women in a movie called Angry Indian Goddesses, and last film show with 5 kids. So I'm just going to share my own experience. First of all, when we made Angry Indian Goddesses, I was never supposed to make that movie. It was way back in 2012. There was an outcry from all the young girls who were working me on my production that no one makes a film about 3-4 girls going out and having fun. Everybody go to Spain, but it's 3 boys. If it's 3 idiots, it's always few boys who go out and have fun. But what about us, So I said, well, that's a good idea. Maybe a woman director should make that movie. This was way back in 2012. And they said, but none of them are making it, And they started doing research, then interviewed a lot of people across urban India only. They limited to urban India interviews from CEO to women who are pilot, captain. And for me, even as a man, it was a revelation. There was so much of learning happening there. So finally, when that film we wanted to make, there was a lot of responsibility. How do you tackle such a subject? Or on top of that, I'm a man, so we created a situation where we didn't write the script, where all the actresses contributed their own experiences and interviews they did in order to bring as much authenticity as possible. And time and again, always there was a question of how do you talk about something like rape, And so whenever we went to interview people, we talk about violence, yeah, but almost 95% of women said, I'm just going to take the gun and shoot the guy, or I'm going to find my way to just get them, because I cannot wait. So that was also a shocking revelation for me. So in a way, it became a big responsibility for us to portray that in the film, that how do you, sort of talk about all these modern issues. And so we created a platform where let the actresses contribute. Me as a director, I took a back seat. So, and I think the impact was that when we went out, the market, of course, is very different. They just said, oh, women can't open box office. So you can't, you can't have a movie about all these women, So that was one of the first reaction. So the industry was also very hostile to idea of even making a subject like that. Afterwards, many, many films came out. But I remember in 2013 when movie came out, it was press labeled it as India's first female buddy film, so, so I thought it sort of violence sort of prevailed in a many ways. So anyway, going back to the kids, I mean, as a filmmaker, I hope I never have to write children and animal in my script, if I can, because it comes with huge responsibility.
Absolutely.
Just the way, as a man, if I'm making writing a character of a woman, I always have a huge dilemma. I have done very erotic scene in my movies, if you have seen them. It's a huge responsibility, So you have to really understand, what tickles men, what arouses women. It's to find a balance is very hard. So for me, going about, it's the same approach when it comes to children. When you have them, 5 of them on your set, they are non-actors. So I had to literally talk with investors, producers to convince them we can't do 40-day schedule. We have to have a 62-day shooting schedule. With kids will only work 5 to 6 hours a day. And 1 or 2 hours we will dedicate to their schooling, as we have promised, And sometimes because of the economics of the film, it's very hard, to convince, oh, no, we have to shoot 12 hours. We have to find child who are actors. So it is a battle, but we did manage to do that in last film show because I was one of the producer. And I said, look, these kids are going to be on the film all the time. We have to find a way. We created a whole kind of rules and system that their purity is not destroyed. Like the crew was absolutely not allowed to play with them. Because very often as a kid, maybe you might have experienced, you play with crew, and then by the time you face the camera, all your energy is consumed by the play, and when you, between the action and cut, they don't perform well. But I also realized the responsibility of casting kid continues much after. The violence is kind of what they encounter after the movie gets over. Once they become celebrated, they need to be taken care of. That is a huge responsibility, according to me.
Absolutely. And
We don't create content for children because we don't think about them enough, one. And whenever we do, as she very correctly said, we are catering to an adult audience because we are so busy growing up, but we've actually forgotten our own childhoods.
Absolutely.
And that is the problem, since you do not want to remember also the joy and the complexity of being a child. I mean, look at the world around you. How many of us even look at children as little people who observe life around
Absolutely.
them? We don't. We either talk down to them or we bark orders at them. And it's again the attitude of the adult mind which is impacting children. Again, it's about observation. We don't observe it at all.
Absolutely. And Neeta ji, that's why I wanted to, since we've heard what they've had to say. And a lot of times I know the government decides to censor content. And because now we have the streaming platform, like a senior filmmaker actually told me, there's a kind of purging going on because there's no censorship. So, as he said in Hindi, ki sari bhadas nikal rahi hai creative freedom ke naam pe. But when the government decides to censor stuff, they're called out. It becomes a debate. Like, why? They should give us that freedom of expression. But somewhere it's also impacting people who are consuming it. Lately, we've had these horror stories of men chopping their girlfriends inspired by Dexter. It's something similar they consumed. What are the challenges that you all face? Because I know the Cinematograph Amendment Act where you want to rate and grade movies, but who's even adhering to that? Because in the theaters you see it's 18 plus, but there are 14-year-olds consuming that content. क्या है, हमने तो OTT पे देख लिया है, इसमें क्या दिखाएंगे, you know?
Yes, so as we know that the content that is created is distributed across different platforms. So since the definition of platform varies, so that there are rules for all these platforms. So when it comes to, first of all, let me say a bit about violence. That violence in today's world is totally unacceptable in any form.
Yeah.
There may have been a time of the hunter-gatherer when violence was the norm, when killing was the norm. That was for survival. But in today's world, when we talk about rights of human beings, when we talk of rights of the children to grow up well in a society, in a loving society, when we talk of kindness, violence is totally unacceptable. Our Prime Minister has said this is not the era of war, which basically means nor the horrors that the war comes out with, violence, or in any myriad ways that it affects human beings, women, children, men. It's not an era of war, it's not an era of violence. So it's totally unacceptable in any form. So looking at this point of view, for the exhibition of films, for the certification of films, we have the Cinematograph Act, which was amended this year to include 3 more age categories. These are we have Universal. Madam is a member of the CBFC board. We have UA 7+, UA 13+, UA 16+, and then at 18. Of course, 18 is adult. So we have created these different age classifications so that the guardians, the parents are able to decide where their children, which kind of content their children should be watching in the cinema halls. Now, to take it further, we will be also, this act is already in place, notified. To take it further, we will be amending and incorporating these categories into the cinematograph rules. And then CBFC will come up with guidelines. What exactly does it mean? What kind of content should go for a 7-year-old or a 13-year-old? Because there are fine lines sometimes in between. So somebody has to take that call and decide what exactly has to be watched by a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. So that will be done after a lot of conversation with the experts and parents and other people and child rights bodies. If you would have some idea, in 2016, Mr. Shyam Benegal had submitted a committee, a report whereby he was heading a committee. It's called the Expert Committee, headed by Mr. Shyam Benegal. That was about what kind of amendments or improvements can be made in the certification process of films. So thereby he had suggested some guidelines about age classifications. To a large extent, that age classification has been adopted in the IT rules that were amended in 2000, that were made in 2021. These were the intermediary guidelines and digital media ethics code in 2021. These were the IT rules. You would be aware that these rules and age classification was made mandatory on all the digital platforms and the OTT platforms. So the entire content and what kind of depiction is to be made and what kind of marking is to be done and description is to be done for that content on the digital platforms is now mandatory for all the OTT platforms. There are 57 OTT platforms in this country that are registered with the ministry. So now it is binding on them. But the oversight mechanism that has been kept so far is self-regulatory. So the government has reposed a lot of trust in the OTT platforms that they would regulate themselves. So if there is a grievance about a content that has been shown there, so the first level of grievances has to be handled by the OTT platform itself. and then by a self-regulating body, an association of OTT platforms, and at a third level, it comes to an interdepartmental committee in the government. So, so the mechanism as in today is based on trust and faith in the OTT platforms, and I hope that they raise to the occasion. But the issues that you have raised are very, very important in this.
Absolutely.
This is absolutely wonderful, Neerja ma'am and Vani ma'am, to learn that, the age classifications are done. Because as an audience, sometimes I get very confused when I watch foreign films being censored for a kiss, and then there is a 12-year-old watching a film like Jawan where people are killing and, there are guns and blood. So, where do you draw the line with violence, and where do you draw the line with an adult content which is meant for an adult and should be okay for an adult? So I think.
And what we don't realize often is that we only talk about profanity. We go on talking about frontal nudity, we go on talking about expletives. We don't realize that the manifestation of violence in a little child's mind is going to remain manifested for the rest of his or her life.
Absolutely.
I mean, the fact that one time you've seen a body being cut and that blood being splattered, that image shall remain. And look at child psychologists all across the world. This debate has been raging over the years. Another thing, Puja, we often forget is the cultural nuance of a country. We are a very nuanced democracy. I'll give you an example, and I'm sure there's an international, friends also sitting in the audience. In France, I'm giving you this example so we understand what uber-liberal societies, which look very, very, pro-liberal portrayals, also do with their own certification. In France, frontal nudity is not much of a problem. Gangster films is. But in the United States, there wouldn't be a Francis Ford Coppola if gangsters films was a problem. Frontal nudity is a problem. So every culture, every society has its own nuance, and the depictions have to be in consonance of how we look, at those portrayals. You can't say, oh, I am one big free thinker. We are all free thinkers. In our mind, we are free. But does the constitution of any country say that you are free and you are sans responsibility? So it is, as I said, the responsibility lies with the audience and the makers equivocally. It should be distributed. It's understood that you will get aware of that sense of responsibility, especially towards children. It's only then that you will start thinking scripts and you will start thinking stories which are in consonance with that responsibility.
Absolutely, but also with children, I think women are portrayed in a stereotypical way also, because if she is a bold woman, so-called bold woman, a woman who knows her mind, there has to be a backstory that she's actually not the other Shwadi, that there is something, she's been abused, something. A woman can be a woman. I mean, we are all here, we all have issues. It's not that we have a story. And also, as you said, even now you see a woman, there was an outrage over, at the beach you are going to wear a swimsuit. But what is the need for a song to have the female artist in the skimpiest of swimsuits just serenading it? It could have been done regularly. Just like a beach song. He is wearing a shirt, but she is in the skimpiest. Why do we need to constantly objectify the body? And also now
because in our minds we are constantly objectifying women.
And the need
Why do I say these portrayals are thought processes?
Yeah. And the need to save women. I think for a long time in cinema we have seen that there is the need to save women. And like I was saying, I think I was sharing with you ladies some time ago that this morning or yesterday I was in Goa, yesterday I was looking at the swimming pool from my hotel, and I was from my room, and I saw there were 4 men in the pool. And there were 2 women who were skirting around the pool, not being able to get into the pool because they were the only women over there. And those were wonderful men. Those were just absolutely harmless men. But the stigma in our heads, which has been created, over the years that, one needs to have, be saved by men, or, are we fine on our own? I think we need to have more stories where we need to celebrate women having fun, women having, being on their own, and they need not be holding a cigarette in their hands. Absolutely. And they need not wear the skimpiest of clothes
to stand out in a world of men, you need to be a woman. You don't need to be another man. You don't need to fight it with aggression. You don't need to fight it with bold language and bold gestures. I think you need to do it with the right kind of storytelling and the right kind of depiction.
Absolutely.
So after all the bad news, there's also good news. The
Yeah,
last
I know.
decade,
I also
the
want to ask you
last
about the
decade-
NCPCR guidelines.
Yeah, no, I'm coming to that. But the last decade has been fantastic as far as women is concerned. Nalin said something very interesting. The empirical propaganda was that if the protagonist of a film is a woman, it can't be produced, it will not get financed, it will never reach the box office. If it reaches the box office, it will fail. Somebody like Vidya Balan broke it.
Absolutely.
Dirty Picture happened, Enrichton happened, and look after that, there are films about menstrual hygiene. When was the last time you actually thought there's going to be a love story about toilets? The thing is that, yes, we are growing in our minds.
Absolutely.
And the portrayals are becoming more realistic, not to be judged. I'm going to use one word. They are uglier than before. The hourglass figure of the heroine is gone. The rain-drenched dance sequences are petering out. The gun-toting hero, saving the world, the babe in the woods, the women, and the 35 goons is also slowly getting out, and you're laughing. But it's also because of you that it's petering out. So full marks to you all, us all, because we are consuming stuff which is real. We are not scared of narratives which are honestly about our lives. And we have started to speak things which bother us each single day, including violence against women and children.
Absolutely. And yes, sir.
Yes, so it's been really encouraging to listen to these conversations. The best practices, Shweta and the other speakers, really, there are very good practices that can be replicated, and so the argument that without violence films do not sell, that is an outdated argument, I would say. If you are creative enough, if you know how to tell the story, we have plenty of good practices, not only from now, from earlier times. So, those need to be, how you tell the story of empowerment, of overcoming barriers rather than, victimization, dwelling on victimization. That is something that, need to be moving ahead with. In UNICEF, for responding to violence, we have 6 strategies. And the first is the law that Nija ma'am has, spoken about. There are instruments and laws, but there has to be societal responsibility and trust. You can't go to, with the so much content, and, mobile phone is like, our extension, our arms. It's very difficult to have that monitoring system, but there has to be societal responsibility and trust. And that is what, after implementing law, the second response that we work on is the social and behavioral change, addressing the social norms. And that is where both the source and the receiver. Source are the producers and content makers and film makers, and the audience are the children, their families and communities, really creating that demand by giving them alternative stories, good stories that work, that appeal, that are not only superior in artistic quality, but also commercially viable. Because we cannot subject a child to, the examples that have been cited, bloods and killing, and, these normalizes, desensitizes and normalizes in a child's mind. And next time, subconsciously, they will think it's okay. It's okay.
Absolutely. Also, Shweta and Vaniji, I want to ask you, since you were a child artist yourself, and she's a national award-winning child artist here, and also Vaniji, since you worked so much, has it changed? Because I remember I was on an international project. The child artist only sat for 3 hours for the interview because there was an inspector. Ki itna iska kaam hai, ye itna karega. Beyond that, he will not. Though it was Mowgli. He was the main protagonist. But here, on the other hand, I had a young child artist on an OTT thing. She was there from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m., very much part with her adult, co-stars, and yakking away because Mama and Papa ran her social media account. They were going on uploading pictures. I was just wondering, has this kid even been to school? So what do you think for child artists? Is there something, Shweta, you want to talk? And Vaniji, what do you think are the guidelines that you've been so, actively working on?
So yesterday was 21 years of Makri, as we speak. And honestly, I had a blast shooting for Makri. I did not go on set knowing who was Gulzar Saab, who did the lyrics for the film, who was Vishal Bhardwaj. In fact, I didn't know who was Shabana ji. My mother made me watch Shekhar Kapoor's Masoom before I went on Makri set because I was aware of, who's Karishma Kapoor and Taboo and, Kareena and Preeti Zinta. I used to watch those films as a 10-year-old. And Makri was shot during my winter break. And I was extremely pampered on set. I was always called after my school hours on set. In fact, if I may share an incident, there was this one time we were shooting in Goa, and the hotel where we were staying, all of us where we were staying, शाम को 7 बजे swimming pool बंद हो जाता था. And we used to shoot day, 6 to 6 with the breaks and everything. And every time we would go to the hotel, the swimming pool would be shut. So one day I went to Vishal uncle, to Vishal sir, and I said, what is this? I don't get to swim because we are just shooting the whole day. He actually packed up at lunch so that I can go and, and I did not swim. I just got in for 5 minutes. But I remember how he treated me. I remember that was important for him, that I'm comfortable, that I'm having fun and not being like, oh, we are going to be behind schedule and oh, we are doing this. Another incident was after Iqbal. I was 14 years old, and it was during one of the media interactions. One of the reporters called me Shweta ma'am. And my mother said, please address her Shweta. She's 14-year-old. She's not ma'am. And that is something I remember where my mother was very careful about how I'm being addressed. And not because I shouldn't be respected, but I shouldn't be entitled for being called ma'am at 14. And and them not taking up work after that. I think there was Rajkumar Santoshi, Madhur Bhandarkar offering me work, and there were TV shows that came my way after Iqbal, after its success. But my parents constantly said no to these makers, no to filmmakers, because they were like, she needs to have a normal childhood. She needs to have a life as a teenager, and if she wants to, she'll continue after she's completed her education. Until I completed my graduation, I was not allowed to even think about it as to aspire to be it. So I think it's definitely parents' responsibility. At home, my elocution competition certificate and my National Film Award certificate were kept next to each other because it was my way of my parents telling me they're both equally important.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a responsibility that has to come from home. And I genuinely feel sorry for child actors who are asked to work for hours. They end up not having a childhood. I've met a lot of child actors who actually discuss money, who actually, even now that, they would walk up to me, and I think a couple of years ago I was doing something where somebody was 12-year-old and she said, "Aapka per day kitna hai? Mera per day to itna hai." Or abhi for Diwali, my parents are going to get me an Apple Pro Max, and I'm going to, this is my Instagram followers, it's more than you. And I'm like, child, just paint a mountain, please. Just please paint and just be. But I think it's ambitious parents that steer it and drive it, and it's a huge responsibility.
And now that's an issue, Vaniji. What do you actually think?
So
You've
2
also
years,
written a book,
I've written a book, but 2 years has been very constructive for the National Commission of Protection of Child Rights, and full marks, to them to actually constitute a committee. We actually have paid no attention to work ethics and environment around children. We paid no attention to their working hours in all performing art situations, whether they are OTT, web series, films, advertising, and so on and so forth. And my whole career as an actor, I used to see children all around me. And obviously, I want Nalin to share what best practices they followed during this beautiful film that he made, the last film show, which was India's Oscar entry this year. And Bhaveen, who's so lovely and so intelligent and so sharp. But the guidelines are very simple. All across the world, we looked at best practices, including the United States, where child inspectors, as you said, actually sit. If we were to do it, they will again say censor, license permit Raj, Thanedar, all this will happen. So we got a committee which was from the industry, actors, producers, directors, came together. And we first looked at our own selves. And the ugly truth is that the child is the first to arrive on the set and the last to leave, waits for enormous number of hours. Sometimes it's not fed by the parents because the moment the child will eat food, you go to sleep. And then how do you shoot? So the thing is 8 hours is the cap, including a lunch break. You have to look at the exam calendar of the child. Most schools across India have similar exam schedules, so this is no rocket science. Also the holidays, weekends where the child requires to be, doing other things than just shooting. But as Shweta very correctly said, the onus lies on the guardian or the parent who become managers to their children and they become employment generation agencies. And that is where the whole trouble starts. When the parent is, saying, Mera bachcha hai, aap kya kar rahe ho? Why are you telling us? That is the attitude. So eventually, the mandating part has to be law and it has to be a deterrent. And rather, we were of the view that this should almost look like law enforcement because at the end of the day, somebody has to be responsible for the abuse of a child on a particular, work situation.
Absolutely.
And that's why child rights is a very important word here. And good that the industry did come together. We spoke to hundreds and hundreds of producers, associations, guilds before we actually came to this so that they are on the same page. Another thing that is very bothering is reality TV shows.
Absolutely.
I mean, what happens to a child when the success and the failure, definitive reality is in front of that child? You've just failed the semi-finals of a particular talent show, you've just lost. What kind of a disaster is going to occur in your head?
Absolutely.
What is going to happen to you psychologically? So it's also mandated now that the production house is responsible to take an undertaking from the parent about counseling and if it's a reality TV show. And another thing, when the child is missing school days, private tuition will have to be kept on the set, paid by the producer.
Wonderful, wonderful,
And
wonderful.
that is something where we expect change to occur. But again, it's a responsibility which is shared by all of us.
Absolutely.
Children will remain children. Let us not have them lose their sense of childhood. It is that innocence, that love, that curiosity, that exploration of life should not be snatched away from them just because their parents are earning money out of them.
Absolutely. Lalita.
No, very well said. I think that's what, we didn't we didn't have any rules, but we did impose certain rules when we made last film show. We did have 2 teachers, for 2 hours. We knew that we have to work 5 hours because the child was going to carry the film on his shoulder, and it's very interesting how even parents have a kind of a sad role they are playing right now. We started our audition in Mumbai and Ahmedabad with about 1,000 kids who are so-called professional child actor, and it was disaster. It was completely influenced by TV shows. You can see how much parents must have spent money. The way the kid walk in and they tell you, I can swim, I can drive this, I can do that. And that's not the child talking, that's someone else talking. And me and my casting director, we used to look at each other and say like, what is this, And we went to meet producer and said, we can't shoot this movie because I said, I can't find my child. He has to, and he said, what if we go and look for non-actor? And that's where we hit the jackpot.
Wow.
So we went to remote area and we did another 1,000 auditions, and that's where we found kid. And then it becomes even bigger responsibility because every kid, especially when they were in urban parts of India whom we auditioned, they came with their own ideas of acting. So when we worked with non-actor, at least they were fresh. But we still had a 4 weeks of workshop, which was called How Not to Act workshop, where because there it was all done playfully, the task, we realized we will not burden them with screenplay. We told them we will not tell them scene, nothing. We know that playfully they will learn how the film is made, how the story is told.
Absolutely.
So that needed a long work before, and that needed training from the entire cast. We had 90-member crew. So it's not only limiting to director. It's like how your gaffer who's lighting is going to talk to the child. There was a moment I came, they were all being offered Oreo and milk, And I said, like, who did this? I said, no, they decided to buy. So, there was question of hygiene, what food they are eating. But it becomes a bigger responsibility that, how do you preserve child's energy for the camera while respecting his dignity?
Absolutely.
I mean, beyond, and as I said, it goes on. However, I want to just come back to, depiction of violence against children and women in popular cinema. And one thing I would like to suggest, which I've seen world over, for UNICEF and also for Nija ma'am, because I think the change we are seeking for, that's what I see, I think it has to start at very early age. So it's like tasting food. Today, every kid wants burger and sushi because 20 years when they were 5-year-old, burger and sushis were introduced to India. Today, they want it. In a similar way, if we had exposure of good cinema at the school level, they will grow up with a taste of different kind. And I've seen this being done extremely well in South Korea. It's being, like every such event like IFI in South Korea, morning 10 o'clock shows are for kids. And they show them even violent movie, but the teacher guides them and explain why there is this violence, why those guns were fired. And I have been to my own session with my own movies, and I was blown away by, 10 to 8 to 12 age group kids, the way they watched the movie, the exposure they had, they knew about African cinema, they knew about Latin American cinema, and they knew historically important film. Like in one group, kids told me that one of the most impactful movie was a silent one. So I said, which one? They said, Joan of Arc, where woman was burnt alive in silent. So they had watched this cinema and they knew what was the story. So I feel that we need to give that cultural and art important to fight the popular cinema. Popular cinema will be there. It's like fast food, they will want to consume. But if we parallelly, they can watch the movie which Shweta mentioned, where can we watch this movie? Like if you show Mirch Masala, at young age, or, that Smita Patil, those characters, we did have those great movies. So, and similarly, some international film, and there is an exposure. As they grow, they will want to watch. They will, of course, watch popular cinema, but then there'll be need, I want to watch something different.
If they're introduced, they will make a choice what they want to watch. But if they're not introduced, how are they supposed to know? Because it's not there on TV or anywhere else. I think festivals are a great place to watch, maybe My Friend's Home by Kiarostami, or Close, or even Capernaum, films like that, which are based around children, would be great world cinema exposure to them, for sure.
So as we wrap up, since time is up, another session, Nija, I want to ask you, because we were discussing how now it's no longer family viewing. Those days are gone, because you in your room will be watching something, the same content your daughter will be watching in another room, the mother will be watching something else, and now theaters are where people go together. OTT is, everyone is an island in their room. But I know you said, as Vaniji, Shweta, Nalin, and Zafreen all suggested what we can do. What is the way ahead? I know you've got the Amendment Act. I know it's social responsibility. It's the government's responsibility. At the end of the day, it's individual. What do you expect from these creators, and what do you think is the solution going forward? Because it's not all bleak. We've got some fantastic content happening as well, as Vani said.
Yeah, it's very ironic and very revelatory and very strange that cinema is public viewing and the screen at home is supposed to be family viewing. But what is happening is cinema is becoming the family viewing, and the screens at home, because everybody has a different screen, it's individual viewing. So I think the norms that we thought should be applicable on family viewing, that is certification, it has not yet come to, it is not government certification that has come to the OTT platforms, it is self-regulation by the OTT platforms. So, but with the kind of content, there is a mixed content, but the kind of profanity and abusive language, or sometimes which comes out as a promotion to substance abuse and violence definitely. So there has to be a check on these, and the idea was, the concept was that the digital platforms should be able to regulate the whole content themselves as per the evolution of the society. But if the society so feels, and the state so feels at a particular point of time, that this thing is not coming out the way it was planned, that we are exposing our children or families or individuals to too many illegal content. Illegal means violence is illegal, substance abuse is illegal, nudity is illegal. I mean, art is one thing, but the rest of the visuals that we show on television. So if we are exposing too much, then there has to be a check. I hope we come to a point where the society advises and forces the government to put a further check if there is excessiveness on the digital media. The society will have to talk to the government as a stakeholder and request the government and the lawmakers to come out with regulation which OTT platforms as of now have not been able to reach at. So let's hope we should come to that level.
Just one,
yes, absolutely.
one word of hope that I really feel, Puja, is the 75 young creative minds. These movements, not only these 75, there are many, movements happening across the country. We are doing in our own small scales, but we are aware of many. When these children come up in the real sense of putting their voices and views in the mainstream,
Absolutely.
I think things are starting to change with their innovative and creative ideas, and it will change further.
Of course. And parting shot from Vani, Shweta, and Nalinsa. And also, I think the abuses that have the mothers, the sisters, and the children laced with them should also be done away with. It's high time we did that.
You know, there's Utkarshini, my friend sitting here, who wrote Gangubai Kathiawadi this year and got the national award. Why I'm underlining this is she wrote on a sex worker's life. It took her almost 7 years to develop the story, but the depiction of Gangubai is probably one of the best portrayals that you can see in contemporary writing. So this is the kind of writing we need. We need to be sensitive. Nobody is saying you should talk about, women who are against all walks of society, whether they are sex workers, whether, they do things which are supposed to be kosher in society. Of course, these portrayals are important, but what matters is who's writing it and what is the intention and the gaze. And one last thing, this book that I've written, it's the 2.5-year-old's, my own daughter is a protagonist. It's a wide-eyed amazement of the adult world around her. That is what she speaks in the book. It's called Why Can't Elephants Be Red? And the fact that while I was writing the book, I was exploring my own inner world of my own childhood. So the debate I want to rage today, why content is not being created for children, is because we don't want to do realistic writing for children.
Absolutely.
We are constantly peddling frozen castles, kings and queens and fantabulous things. Nothing wrong with fantasy. But what has that got to do with their everyday life?
Absolutely.
Their everyday life is so interesting, so complex, so full of pressure, also so full of joy. So all I'm saying is, just let's start looking within.
Absolutely.
And that is the only change, we can make.
Absolutely.
Well, on parting note, I think, like Neerja ji said, that there needs to be a check on the kind of content that's being produced. I agree, but I think it needs to be guided. I don't think we need to shy away from issues like Vani ma'am said. We can have depiction of illegal things that you're talking about, like drugs and sex working or violence or guns and nudity, whatever. I don't think we need to shy away from showing that in our films. It needs to be guided right. Last year we had this show by Zendaya on Apple. Euphoria. It shows mental health and abuse, but beautifully educating the audience. So I don't think we need to shy away from the content, but need to write it. The narrative needs to be set where people watch it and be like, okay, I'm learning something. I know I don't need to do this. I choose not to do this. I think not just in terms of abuse against women and depiction of women in cinema, I think it does not just stop at, it does not limit at the way the characters are written or the hero coming and rescuing the women. It's also the titles of the projects, it's also the songs, it's also the color, the Ucha Lamba Kads and the Chitya Kalaya that needs to be really be checked on. I think that's also violence, when you hear a song like that and you're like, oh, I'm not that tall, and you're like, I'm not that fair, oh, that's problem, oh, I don't fit in then. And the depiction of perfect beauty in society, I think we need to really give away with all of that. We need to to really have new stories, fresh ideas, women that we see every day. To filmmakers out there, to storytellers out there, all I want to say is start with your own home. See how your father treats your mother. If you don't like it, make a story about that. If you like it, make a story about that.
Absolutely. And also to the media, no more clickbait headlines, please, because usually it's the female actor and her personal life, or a male actor. I think we don't need that because it only encourages people to consume more of that, you know. So I think that also from the media's point of view. Yes, sir.
I really like this couch where we are not talking about private life.
But there is coffee outside.
No, I think I would just insist upon the young generation that there should be an exposure to what are the great women role in cinema, and similarly for children. I think that if they develop taste, we will see very different stuff in entertainment 15 years from now. Like we have seen, I have witnessed in my lifetime in country, this changes, you know. And again, I'll speak about South Korea, that they can make a film about 70-year-old woman called Poetry, who writes poetry, and have a massive box office. And everyone who want to watch is like young people. It didn't start there. It started way back, you know, of constantly them being exposed to good cinema, good literature, and same time in world cinema as well. And I think we have that as a big issue right now, that the cinema as a medium, you know, we don't do that for literature. You know, in the school we do have great literature, we do have music and classical music, but when it comes to cinema, there are just no curriculum. So if that helps, you know, then they will know what is a portrayal of women, you know, in a film, what is a portrayal of child. And then they will also wonder, as a boy, if they go home and mother gives the hot chapati first to him and not to her sister, they will start questioning that, okay, problem lies, you know, somewhere else. You know, it's not just so simple that all responsibility rests with filmmaker. You know, it's parents trying to push kids to go into reality shows, and so the change is if it's in the child, everything will change over one and a half decade. That's what I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much. And we're sorry if we have delayed the next session, but this was pretty interesting. I think we could now all carry on and on. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.